Welcome to the Boston Asian American Film Festival's closing night conversation for Ramona S. Diaz's A Thousand Cuts. I'm Susan Chinson, BAAFF's Festival Director and Creative Producer at Arts Emerson, speaking to you today from the unceded land of the Wampanoag, Nipmuc, and Massachusetts tribal nations. Before we begin, on behalf of the staff and volunteers of BAAFF, ARW, and Arts Emerson, I want to take a moment to say we did it. 4 months ago, we weren't even sure if this was going to be a possibility. Really, up until fairly recently, even on the fly, we've been holding on to the importance and value of what the festival holds in an actual physical space. And we've worked and tried to find creative ways to translate that into a virtual setting. And it's been so heartwarming to start hearing from so many of you in the audiences, from filmmakers to viewers, new and returning, about how exciting this festival has actually turned out. I'm excited to officially call this year a success, creating community space and upholding a circle of trust between all of you in the audience there and the filmmakers, partners, sponsors, staff, and volunteers. One group I'd really like to take a moment to call out is a great, deep appreciation for our programming and screening committee. Our 65 members, yes, 65 members, spent the whole summer reviewing, watching, to curate a series during this festival that resonates with our theme, Rising Together, amplifying the voices and stories that need to be heard now. One story that really stood out in particular is that of Maria Ressa's, which brings us to our closing night film, A Thousand Cuts, which is being co-presented today with the Filipino Festival in Malden, Boston Filipinx Education Advocacy and Resources, and BOSS Filipinos. And today, joining us today is founder of BOSS Filipinos, Trish Fontanilla, who will be helping host our conversation. Trish, I'll turn it over to you.
Hi, everyone. So I am thrilled to be moderating today's Q&A for A Thousand Cuts with award-winning director, writer, co-editor, and producer, as well as Emerson alum, Ramona S. Diaz. So welcome, Ramona.
Hi, Trish. Thanks for having me. This is, it's such an honor to be closing night, so thank you.
Yes, absolutely. So before I get to questions, I did want to say, I have some questions to ask Ramona, but given the nature of this film, we hope that you'll share any questions you have in the live stream, and I'll try to ask as many as possible. So my first one is, so October is Filipino American History Month, and it's interesting to watch a film like this and to see some parallels between the rise of Duterte and the rise of Trump, both being these non-politicians promising to change things for the better. And the story takes place in the Philippines, but has global implications. Can you talk a little bit about your Filipino American lens and how that impacted your filmmaking process?
I guess it's one of those things that I don't think a lot about because I am it, right? It comes organically. It's not something that is academic to me because I live it every day, and it happens to be. When I film in the Philippines, I see certain things from certain angles that maybe a non-Filipino would necessarily see. So I like to shine a light on that particular thing. So but I know I'm doing it, but nothing very conscious. It's not something that, this is like Filipino America. No, it just comes because it is me, right? I can't be any other way but who I am. I was born and raised in the Philippines. I spent my childhood in the Philippines, but I left to go to Emerson, actually. I attended university here. So I became an adult in this country. So I still go back and forth. So I very much am 1 foot there and 1 foot here. And I am both a participant in both societies, but also very much an observer, which is a great vantage point to be when you're a documentary filmmaker. It's good to be an observer, to be somewhat on the outside looking in, but in a way you can also be on the inside because I can still sort of join the stream of life there and here.
Yeah, absolutely. So the documentary film, I think that is such an interesting perspective because as a documentary, you're on the outside. So the voices that you got from Duterte's followers and supporters, I think, is so helpful in this story, right? So it's not this one-sided journey in the film. Can you talk a little bit about how you gained their trust and how you pitched 1,000 cuts to them to get them on film?
Well, Trish, in the beginning, it wasn't really necessarily about uh, Maria Ressa only. What drew me back to the Philippines was the fact that President Duterte became president in 2016. I was raised under martial law. I saw what a dictatorship was like. And I also saw when dictatorship ended, when the Marcos regime ended in 86, and how long it took to build the institutions of democracy. So for the Philippines to then, vote into office someone like Duterte, it was quite alarming. So that was what drew me back to look at that. So I was interested in the Philippines under someone like Duterte in 2016. And of course, the drug war. The drug war was also drew me there because it was horrific. I saw the photographs. But when I got to the Philippines, it was also, I realized a lot of people were doing films about the drug war. And I looked around, I usually stayed for many months. I usually I like to think of moving. I moved there when I started making film. I moved back. And there was Maria Ressa. Not only was she talking about impunity and the drug war and questioning the numbers, but she was also talking about disinformation and the weaponization of social media. And she was talking about algorithms when no one else was talking about algorithms. In 2016, she was one of the very first. And the intersectionality of that. So I thought, wow, this is really interesting because I'd never heard it so clearly unpacked before. And I thought it would be a more global story. It's just, to me, it's what moves me. I call my explorations, and I thought, wow, that is an interesting story. So that's how it came to be. But so in the beginning, I thought of it as a very ensemble cast of people. Like I always pitched it as, Robert Altman-esque, right? Like in shortcuts, interweaving storylines, but in shortcuts, Los Angeles is very much a story. Manila was going to be very much a story, right? And then Duterte is sort of affecting all these people's lives. Even if you never saw him, you felt him. So that was really my pitch. But it's stories unfolding. I don't know how it's going to end. I don't know how it's going to unfold. So as we started filming, Maria got arrested and arrested again. She became Time 100 person of the year. 10% of the year. So it was obviously the center of gravity of the film was shifting, and I had to shift with it. I realized, okay, she has more visual weight in the film than the others, but it was also very key to me because I'm very interested in Mokausan as well, and General Bato and Samir Gutok. I was interested in them and what motivated them, what moved them. Of course, General Bato, he's the implementer of the drug war. I wanted to see why he really believed in it. And I wanted to really understand why someone like Mokausan was very loyal to the president. And it's true, they have their own personal stories. No one is an anti-hero in their own narrative. And I just wanted to know why they thought they were heroes in their narrative. Everyone's always has a particular reason, or a narrative that moves them or that drives them to act.
Yeah, I love as a Filipino American, it's watching that and seeing the different perspectives of people saying from their own words of how they felt and why they were siding I'm like trying to use respect like tita or lola at the end. That's like, my taxes are like, I'm fine. So why should I care? And I could see people I know and hearing that perspective is so important because we just assume, not the worst of people, but that they're not educated. And it's like, no, but if things are impacting them in a different way and we're not listening to that, like seeing those words from their mouths interwoven in the story is so important.
Yeah. And it's okay. It doesn't touch you until it touches you. Right. So a lot of people were saying that the streets are safer, their neighborhoods are quieter until it's not, because the killings were random. I mean, they didn't go through due process, right? So
Mm.
until uh, it's your brother or your cousin or your father, then it's no longer safe, right? It's
Mm.
safe until it's not safe, because it's not there's impunity, right? There's no rule of law, so you can't really know. So
Mm.
yeah, and but there are voices that need to be heard, that need to be understood as well, you know. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to go back to the Emerson piece, of course.
Yeah.
So you started here, you had this Boston Asian American Film Festival, and you had this tie to Boston, you went to Emerson. And while you were going to school here, can you talk a little bit about your journey, I guess? So like, were your VMA projects, did they focus on the Philippines, or did you decide to tell those stories after you graduated?
Oh, Trish, much after I graduated. Oh gosh, just dating myself, but so I did a photography, film, and television
Mm.
mixed minor, right? And I loved Emerson so much because it gave me the freedom to try all those things. And you're in the back bay and you're just scattered across the back bay. I don't know what it's like now, but it was like, I lived in Fenway. Is that
Mm.
right? Those two buildings I remember so well. And I just I thought it was such a great time to be there. It's such a great time to be a student at Boston too. That's my only experience of Boston as a student, and I think I romanticized it in my head because I was really young and I really enjoyed it. But no, I wanted to learn film and fiction film. Actually, I started in fiction. So I was studying a lot of the canon, and the canon is usually Western, right?
Mm.
I was exposed to that for not the first time. I'd seen some of that. That's what got me interested in film to begin with. But when I left Emerson, Emerson has such close ties with Los Angeles, right? They have a
Mm.
great internship program. So I ended up in Los Angeles working for Remington Steele, which was this
Mm.
television series with Pierce Brosnan. Oh my God, then this is really aging me. So that's where I end up, and that's largely because of Emerson, because of their ties of they have internships and then which eventually lead to jobs. So that was my very first gig, and it was episodic television. Um, and I did that for 5 years until it ended. And Pierce Brosnan became Bond, or he wanted to become Bond, and it ended. As a series always do, there's a natural end. It just people are really tired of it, so that ended. I also thought I needed a change of something. I enjoyed it immensely, but I thought, wow, I don't know where I can go from here, if there was space for me in that place as a woman of color, as a young Filipino. I didn't know whether I would be, what voice I had, or if they were going to listen to my voice even.
Mm.
So I went back to the Philippines. This was in 87, right after the revolution, after the Marcos dictatorship ended. And when I went back, that was when my love for the documentary form took root, because there were
Mm.
after you have to imagine, it's after years and years of silence, right, of oppression. Suddenly people were allowed to talk, and talk they did, and there was such a big clamor for real stories and stories in the streets, that I planned to stay for a year and go back to LA and then resume my life in television, or I thought I wanted to do that. But then um, I stayed for 5 years or 4 years in the Philippines. And after a while, I realized, I need to learn more about the documentary form. I just didn't have the wherewithal. I need to be exposed to. I like watching other people's work before I really like immersing in the work, immersing in all that's come before me. And so I went back to the States and did a grad program in documentary film, in documentary film at Stanford. So that's really how my love for the documentary form took root. Yeah, I had to go back home, and that's how it took root.
Yeah. And so was there anything particular about deciding to, I mean, not everyone decides to explore their, roots. They tend to go, explore deep diving or something outside. Was there any kind of pull for you? Because like you mentioned, there's not a lot of representation. There isn't anyone to look, oh, that documentary filmmaker is doing stuff in the Philippines. Maybe I'll do it. What was kind of drive? I mean, I know you said that your general drive is, from interviews that you're character driven, but was there something that really brought you back to the Philippines?
You mean right after?
Well,
the
as far as
series
like
ended?
deciding the storytelling, you could
Oh,
go left field,
yeah.
but yeah.
The start of my career, my very first film out of school was Imelda Marcos. I made
Mm,
a feature-length film about the former Philippine First Lady,
yeah.
which I didn't realize now. That was my first film. And everyone said, that's your first film? I thought, why not? Right? I never thought that it was such a, yeah, because I got access. And she said, yes. And so why not?
Mm,
So that was my first, and that to me was a gimme, right? Of course, I have to do that because I grew up, with her writ large in my imagination, in reality and also in my imagination, because she was everywhere during the martial law years. You couldn't really pick up a newspaper without seeing a picture of her on the front page.
mm,
So that was like, of course. And then what kept drawing me back was I found I had more stories to tell and more
mm,
things to say about the Philippines, and I realized that I could make it universal. It's very specifically Filipino, very specifically Philippine stories, but there is something very I always feel like I need to speak to a larger audience, and there has to be something that touches them that's universal. And that's not really hard, right? Because people are people. And that's why I like immersive filmmaking, because at the end of the day, you're filming behavior. That's what I do. I film behavior. I film
mm,
people. And in the end, we're the same. No matter what we're, like motherland, it's like this very poor hospital in the Philippines. But at the end of the day, they are mothers who care for their newborn
mm.
babies, right? And who can, I mean, mothers will relate to that, right? If they're sick, they're sick. So, and yeah, so I think there's something always, if you touch upon the humanity of it, it's easy then to connect to it.
Definitely. So I'm going to start taking some audience questions in a second, but I know based on co-presenter pair, and I know a lot of folks in the chat are these activists and storytellers that are listening to this Q&A. And so you started to touch a little bit on it, but for them, what kind of tips would you give? Because I do believe this, instead of coming from this place of anger or not understanding, this place of storytelling and empathy, what other tips would you give folks that are trying to tell these stories so that people can hear them, so that it's universal?
Um, to really try to define for yourself why you want to tell the story, right?
Mm,
What is it you want to say? What's your voice? What is it? I think, like I always tell emerging filmmakers, it's there's not a better time to be a filmmaker, because all the tools of filmmaking are so accessible to us,
mm,
right? You can pick up, my God, the iPhone 12. You can pick up and make amazing films. I just saw a film on iPhone 12. That's why I mentioned it. But if you don't know what you're saying or why you want to say it,
mhm,
um, then I think it'll be a little muddled and opaque. But so always define what am I saying? Why do I want to say this? Should I be saying this? Is it me? Am I the right storyteller for this? So I think it's a voice you really have to
mm,
examine, and you have to be truly, truly interested, I think, in the people you're filming, because it is a marathon, right? There's something in me that's very drawn to the people I film. I may not necessarily agree with them, but I have deep curiosity, right, about their
mhm,
lives, about what they do, what moves them, their values. And you have to always be prepared to have your mind changed, right? Because
mhm,
I always think, like, if my mind is changed and I get surprised, the audience will be surprised.
mm.
Because I always feel like if I know what the ending is, then I should be doing fiction. But I like not knowing where it's gonna go. It's a crazy way to make a film, I know, but it's exciting, and I think there's something that emerges that's very that touches something very genuine, and I love when that happens.
Yeah, cool. So one of the questions we got is, how easy or difficult was it as a Filipino American to move around the islands to make 1,000 cuts? And is 1,000 cuts available for screening in the Philippines?
Um, So the first question, how it was kind of, I mean, there were places we could not go,
Mm.
obviously, like really deep and like the south, but we could go to Mindanao, which is, the part of the country that Duterte is from, Davao and stuff. So it was pretty easy. We were aware. People knew what we were doing for the most part. The administration was aware because we needed special permission to be in the pit to film the president as opposed to just being in the media box because it was too far. So he was very aware. I think his awareness of us filming was a security blanket, actually. I think
Mm.
if I was more, if it was out of the radar, it would have been less, a little bit less secure. But his knowing, our being very transparent, really sort of was our security blanket in a way. What was the second question?
Is A Thousand Cuts available for screening in the Philippines?
It's not yet, but we have released it.
Oh, okay.
We released it. We released it for 24 hours right before Maria Ressa's verdict.
Wow.
Excuse me. In June. So we released it because I felt like it was the middle of the pandemic. No one knew that this was coming down, and I needed to shine a light. Right, I needed to make people aware that this verdict was coming down. Right on that Monday, June 15th. So I actually brought it up with my producers, and they said, "Okay, but that's unusual, right? Because you don't release it for 24 hours." And I said, and my producer said, "Well, we can't monetize this because it'll seem unseemly, right? Let's just do it for free for 24 hours." So we had to get all the stakeholders, Frontline, Concordia. I mean, a lot of people who had a stake in the film, and I presented it to them. I said, I want to release it for 24 hours in the Philippines. They're like, really? I said, and it should be for free. Really? And it hadn't been released anywhere yet. We weren't in virtual cinema, not yet. Right? It was right. We were still doing the film festivals. It was right after Sundance, I guess, during the pandemic, right? I mean, we're still in a pandemic, but the early days of the pandemic. And they said yes. It was so amazing. So it was an idea I had on a Monday, and by Friday, everyone had signed off, and we were live in the Philippines Friday night to Saturday night. So on the Frontline YouTube channel, and Frontline said, "Listen, Ramona, this is happening so quickly. We usually get an average of 40,000 eyeballs on a film, but." I said, "That's great, but because maybe only 20,000 because we didn't really advertise it, nothing." I said, "That's great, 20,000 or maybe even 10,000." I'm like, "That's still fantastic." We got 233,000 views in 24 hours, full views. Wow. It was insane. So that's our first release. And it wasn't an official release. It was just one of those things that I felt we needed to do. Mm-hmm. And I'm so grateful that the stakeholders of the film agreed and said, yes, let's do it. Because it's really against, it sounds crazy, but they agreed. So we're going to come back, I think, at the end of the year and and have a release, a real release.
Yeah. So another question. So with 1,000 Cuts being shown on PBS Frontline, they said, parentheses, congrats, many more people across the US will be able to watch your film. Have you received a lot of backlash here or in the Philippines?
Yes, some. The film has been trolled. Not as much as Maria. I haven't been trolled personally, which is interesting. It's the film that's trolled, and it's Maria's even trolled even more because of the film. Some backlash. Certainly it's there. But more support than backlash. More support of the film and more in support of Maria than there is back in this country. Now in the Philippines, that's a whole other story.
Yeah. There's another question. Maria talked about how she found that a handful of fake accounts were disseminating out misinformation. Did she ever learn who was running the accounts and were they run by the Duterte government?
Yeah, I think she says that in the film. There were 3 accounts, like 3 major accounts. So Mocha Usan was one of them. Thinking Pinoy was another one. And there was another one. There was a 3rd account. And they categorized it based on class. So there was a thinking class, which is like for the middle class Filipinos. And then Mocha Usan was for like the less thinking, I guess. And then there was the higher thing, SAS, I forget now the name of the blog, but there were three. It was tiered into different classes of society. So speaking to three different audiences. So yeah, they were able to trace it back to those three.
So we're starting to wrap up. I have hopefully two quick questions to steer it a little bit, because you talked a little bit about fiction, and I watched your AFI interview over the summer that had mentioned, right as you were doing Motherland, right afterwards, you were thinking of fiction, but then you got pulled in the story, and like a true filmmaker, you're like, all right, I'm going to go follow this story.
Yeah.
Fiction in your future, is that your next project?
Yes. Yeah, I've been doing so this pandemic is it's about a really interesting time for me, because we're releasing a film, and I'm having a lot of opportunities to actually pitch fiction and write fiction, which is so it's great. It's not great because the pandemic, it's not good, but the time it's given me, to really think about fiction, it's been amazing. So yes, nothing I can talk about right now, but definitely.
Yeah. So you appreciate your documentary voice, but as I love the Asian American Film Festival, but I would love even more representation on the fiction side. So I heard that piece from you, and I got really excited. And then following this, so I think it's at 8 p.m. Eastern time, where there's actually a national conversation about 1,000 Cuts. Yeah. And some of folks that are tuning in right now might be interested in that. Can you give us a little bit of a preview of the topics we'll be talking about?
It is a conversation starting at 8 with Maria. Maria Ressa is going to be there, moderated by Jose Antonio Vargas, who's a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist. He famously came out as undocumented, and started an organization to help undocumented folks. So he's moderating the conversation, and it will be more about press freedom, journalism, where we're going, disinformation, how that looks like, what is the difference between what I do and what journalism is. So those bigger, not bigger, but just different kind of conversation.
Great.
So go be there.
Yeah, go do that.
I mean, it's all virtual, so you can just stay in front of your computer and just wait for it.
There's no excuses. No excuses.
Yeah.
So I think that's all we have time today. I want to thank you so much to our special guest, director Ramona Diaz. Thank you. I believe you said this is your second event today, or third event, and your next one's gonna be your fourth. So that's why keep hydrated. But this film is up for an Audience Choice Award. So please cast your audience ballot by clicking on the button on the bottom of your screen in the previous viewing window, and let us know how much you love the film. As this is the closing night of the Boston Asian American Film Festival, I'm going to turn it back over to festival director Susan Chinson for some closing remarks. So Susan.
Yeah, and congratulations for doing it. Yay.
Thank you so much, Ramona, and thank you, Trish, for such an insightful conversation. Ramona, your passion for being your curiosity, I think, has enlightened so many people, especially at this time through this pandemic and sort of into our upcoming election. This story resonates so much with the information that we need to know, and sort of how we can sort of arm ourselves with more information to be able to make a difference in this world. So thank you so much for all the work that you're doing, and we look forward to seeing more from you. And we expect that this will not be the last, and we hope to get to bring you back to Boston so you can join us here in person.
Yeah, that'd be great.
And Trish, thank you so much for such wonderful moderation and your curiosity and sort of being able to really represent and speak for many of us here in Boston who wanted to know more about Ramona, and just Ramona, your ability to share with us how sort of you've made that journey coming from Emerson College now to sort of like a bigger, broader screen, having over 250,000 YouTube viewers in 24 hours. That's amazing. Congratulations. And for Frontline, for folks who are curious to know that this will be coming to Frontline, I believe in January. I think it's the first. I think you're opening the season, so congratulations on that.
Yes, I think it's on the 8th, right? 8th and 7th. Oh my God! Yeah. Don't kill me.
It's sometime in January. follow us on BAAFF. We will definitely let folks know
Thank
because
you.
we will.
Yeah.
We're huge fans not only of you, Ramona, but also of our friends at GBH and Frontline. So we're really excited about that. And we are excited to also be part of this coalition of Asian American film festivals. We have been in one of the fortunate things that has come out of this pandemic is that it has enabled us to reach out across the nation and find ways to work together. So supporting a film like this on a national release has been part of that effort. And so tonight, as Trish had mentioned, there will be a conversation at 8 p.m. with Maria, yourself, Ramona, and Jose Antonio Vargas moderating. And I believe for folks who are following us on the YouTube chat, the link to be able to connect to that is also going to be should be posted there as well. We're also really excited to be, I'll take this moment since I've already mentioned GBH, some of our other sponsors that have helped make this festival happen, really with the trust in thinking that we could do it and early belief to continue your support through this weekend. I'd like to recognize our premier sponsors, Tufts Medical Center, South Cove Community Health Center, Stewart Barnes, and Lake Winnipesaukee Golf Club, and festival sponsors, Boston Cultural Council, ARP, and ARIA Boston, and especially GBH. And just a reminder too that your voice does matter. And as Trish had mentioned, that this is up for an Audience Choice Award as well as the many other films that you may have seen over the course of this weekend. And we do encourage you to please go and vote and let us know what you think of the films. We'd love to share any feedback we get also with filmmakers. And not only are we looking for you to take action and to vote on the films that we've presented as features this week, but also to think about the upcoming election and how you can help support, make sure that everyone's voice is heard. For yourselves, please take the time to go out, if you haven't already, to cast your ballot or encourage others and support others who are doing so as well. Just a reminder that we are continuing past tonight. For those who you may want to go and tell to watch 1,000 Cuts, 1,000 Cuts will actually still be available through our site in Arts Emerson until tomorrow evening. So there's still some time to catch 1,000 Cuts before we close on that. And then we are continuing with our shorts through November 1st, as well as Arts Emerson has extended our centerpiece narrative film Coming Home Again until November 1st as well. So again, thank you all for joining us, Trish, Ramona, for being here this evening, and to all our other filmmakers and all of you out there who have tuned into view. This has been such a strange time that we've all been living in, and it has been amazingly wonderful. Even though it's not the same, definitely it's not the same as being in person together, but to be able to find a way to still manage to create this community space that we've all been able to find support in during such difficult times. So thank you for being together while we're still apart. On behalf of BAAFF, we'd like to thank you again for joining us. Good night, stay safe and healthy. Thank you.